There was a unicorn in the woods behind my house. Yes, an actual, real, live unicorn. Of this I was certain. I had seen it on more than one occasion from the window in the twilight while grumpily sipping my morning coffee. It was no more than fleeting glimpses of its ethereal, glittering glow from between the verdant trees, mind you, but I saw it nevertheless. A pristine white horse with flowers braided into its ivory mane and tail, an iridescent horn sprouting from its forehead, absolutely radiating with light and magic. It was a unicorn, without a doubt. This house, more like a cabin out in the middle of nowhere, was actually my aunt's. I was renting it after the divorce. My husband left me for a younger woman, leaving me with a new baby, and I was miserable, resentful. How could he leave me alone with a child I didn't even want? I kept asking myself. We argued so much about kids at the beginning of our marriage. He told me before I accepted his proposal that he was fine without having any, and then he basically bullied me into it, and left me with a newborn baby while he ran off with a 20-year-old Barbie doll. It wasn't that I didn't love my son. In fact, when he was born, I felt like Dorothy stepping out into the colorful world of Oz. Everything changed. I truly never thought that I was able to love someone as much as I love him. But with my husband's betrayal, I was becoming bitter. And with every sleepless night, the more diapers I had to change, and every time he literally pissed on me while trying to change them, the more angry I became. Not at my son, but at my husband. I am an author. Or at least I was. My first book wasn't a great hit, but it wasn't a flop either. A lot of critics actually expressed excitement and hope for my future project, saying I had great potential. It was a romantasy, or a romance, within a high fantasy setting. I had written it mostly while enrolled in high school and college, which, according to reviewers, was apparent. But it was fueled by teenage hormones and a deep craving and aching for love and intimacy. The problem was that I had had writer's block for nearly a decade after that. That and the fact that I had been unhappily married for almost just as long. The muses had abandoned me, it seemed. Nothing inspired me. Nothing enchanted me anymore. That was, until I saw the unicorn for the first time. I was up at around 6 o'clock a.m., and not by choice. The baby had been crying all night, and so I was up with him, weeping my own eyes out, of course, but mostly trying to get him to go back to sleep. And in that perpetual state of hating the world, I sat at my aunt's little round kitchen table and bitterly glared out of the floor-length window before me. It was foggy, misty out. The twilight blanketed the forest surrounding me, and the fireflies were still fluttering around from the night before. I expected to see birds or raccoons, maybe some deer if I was lucky, but no. A huge white horse appeared on the edge of the woods, eating the green, dewy grass and the wildflowers from the yard. I was shocked at that in itself, because I'd never seen a wild horse before. The woods were a location that I had never expected for them, as I'd assumed they preferred plains and fields. But when it turned its head to the side, I saw it. A large, iridescent, glowing horn. And I gasped. Standing up, I knocked my coffee cup off of the table and into the floor. It loudly shattered on the hardwood, and with the walls being so thin, the magical creature heard it. Shaking my head, I watched it take off and vanish into the enchanted forest from whence it came, and the color was drained from my world yet again. Aragorn, my beloved son, started crying again at that point. Yes, he is named after the character from Lord of the Rings. I am a Tolkien fan, sue me. I let out a defeated sigh. Come on, Johanna, you're losing it, I thought. A fucking unicorn? What are you, 5 years old at a princess party? Dismissing the sighting as an exhausted hallucination, I went to aid the only person in the world that I didn't absolutely loathe, and I put it out of my mind. Kid Johanna would have been jumping out of her skin. I was always into fantasy and fairy tales, and unicorns were definitely a big part of that. I even had a whole collection of those cute little colorful unicorn dolls with the long hair you could brush and put hair bows and clips in. I wonder whatever happened to those. In fact, growing up in the 90s, I was bombarded with rainbow unicorns. Toys, school supplies, figurines, clothing, posters, you name it, I had it. It was really inspiring to my writing, because I started penning little short stories about these characters I liked so much, and I loved it. But my husband did not. He was my high school sweetheart, and even back then, he would act like he was more mature than me because of my interests. So I gave it all up for him. Not just the rainbow trapper keepers and the dolls, but really my inner child as well, the little Johanna within me. I locked her away for him. Even my brightly colored clothing, dyed hair, and rainbow makeup slowly faded out as we dated. By the time we got engaged during college, I wore a lot of gray pantsuits and had my hair short and brown just like he liked it. Professional, he called it, but it always felt soulless to me. And that seemed to be how the world around me was devolving. It went from bright colors and smiling, fantastical characters to desolate, monotone, corporate-approved drivel, plus the necromancing of our old beloved characters into dumbed-down, heartless cash grab reboots for iPad babies with no attention spans was pretty aggravating. We are truly living in a dystopian horror. Honestly, I don't think I would have stayed with him if 9/11 hadn't happened. We were on a field trip to New York City at the time, so we had front row seats to the chaos. And we were different after that. Not just my ex and I as individuals, but I believe all of us as a nation had changed, and not for the better. It really woke us up to how fragile life can be, to how truly broken our world was. But it also united Americans under racism and xenophobia, the true national pastime. I suppose he and I found solace in one another. He was there for me during the nightmares. Seeing those poor people jumping from the towers had just seared itself into my mind. Sometimes I still zone out and flash back to it, but he is no longer there to hold me as I weep. A few days passed, and Aragorn thankfully calmed down, so I actually got to sleep in. I was working as a freelance editor and proofreader. Why let my diplomas waste away to little more than desk catchers, right? They cost way too much money and way too much time for that. But I worked remotely, at my laptop, on that same little table in the kitchen, forever dressed in the dullest of grays. And one day, at about noon, whilst editing a rather disgusting dark romance novella, I saw it again. This time, I was drinking some delicious mint tea with honey, but I was certain not to spill, drop, or knock it over. Again, it was cautiously eating the grass and brightly colored flowers in the backyard, but lingering right at the edge of the woods. It seemed to really love them, or maybe it was just ravenous. From what I saw through the trees, the forest did not appear to have much grass or flowers. A memory of feeding a horse an apple at a petting zoo as a child flashed before my eyes, and I remembered that I had recently had some groceries delivered, which included some fresh apples. I had them in a beautifully carved wooden bowl on the counter. Standing up, I walked over and wrapped my hands around one, my long nails glittering in the light. Smiling, I quietly made my way toward the back door and slowly opened it. It creaked, but not loudly enough to scare the creature away. Curiously, looking up at me, it showed me its cosmic galaxy eyes, which featured slowly spiraling shades of blue, purple, and pink. They sparkled like stars in the night sky as it slowly blinked, batting its long eyelashes at me. This beauty bewitched me so much that I had actually dropped the apple and froze. Tears of awe filled my eyes as I realized I could not rip them away. The shiny fruit tumbled off of the small porch and through the green grass and wildflowers between us, finally landing at the unicorn's hooves. For a moment, it kept its eyes on me. Seeing that I was remaining still, simply observing it, it seemed to begin to trust me, and so it slowly, cautiously, lowered its head down and began to chew on the apple below. And again, that glittering iridescent horn, radiating light in the form of what looked like a white lens flare, truly enchanted me. And of course, me being me, I wanted more, because nothing is ever good enough for spoiled little Johanna. I slowly stepped down off of the porch and into the grass with my bare feet. Warily walking toward it as I continued eating, I reached my hand out, hoping for a simple pet. A little stroke of its fur. Just as I approached, however, it neighed, lifting back onto its hind legs. This frightened me enough so that when I backed away in reaction, I tripped and fell back on my behind. Sitting there, I saw just how large and frightening the creature was, and again I froze in place. The unicorn turned around and ran back between the trees at once. I saw its otherworldly glow fade into the misty forest before me, slowly breathing in and out. Holding my hand to my heart, I felt it beating quickly, and I truly felt alive for the first time in a very long time. Right then, my baby boy started crying again, and in reaction, I immediately began lactating. He must have been hungry. Smiling, I stood up, excited to tell him about the magical creature I had seen. It may have just been a baby, but I enjoyed talking to him about it. It felt like we were actually bonding for once. The next time I saw it was a few weeks later. Again, I was exhausted, but trying to stay positive. Drinking my coffee at around 7:30, I noticed it shyly peering out from behind the trees again, and I began to study it. I wasn't going after the grass or the flowers this time. Instead, it would inch its head out and timidly look around before hiding again. And I knew it wanted another apple. This time I'll try to bring it over to it, I thought, standing up from the table. I then retrieved one of them from the counter and stepped outside. Again, I took my time, cautiously making my way across the yard. Keeping my eyes on the beautiful creature, I kept my hand held out, holding the fresh fruit within it in hopes that it would be able to smell it on me, and it actually seemed to. As I approached, its child crept out from behind it, wobbling and tripping on the grass. A little unicorn foal. It was the most adorable thing I'd ever seen. Nowhere near as cautious as its mother, it skipped right over to me. Immediately, I knelt down into some flowers and gave it the apple. Unfortunately, it seemed to be too large for the baby, so it only ate about half of it. So I took the other piece back into my hand. As the foal frolicked around me, its mother shyly stepped out of the mists, one hoof at a time. Meeting me in the yard, it gazed upon me, seemingly just as afraid of me as I was of it, but when I slowly stood up and offered the rest of the apple to it, it truly seemed to calm down, and as it ate, it graciously let me softly stroke its neck and head, even though I was all but trembling in trepidation, tears quietly running down my face. The thought of telling anyone, other than my son of course, never even crossed my mind. While I'm sure that some people would have wanted to capture it and gain fame or fortune at its detriment, I was never one of those girls. I didn't get into writing for money. It was the art of storytelling that drove me. So the experience of finding a magical creature and its baby was reward enough. Being inspired to write again afterward was simply a perk. My new unicorn friend and her son began to frequent my yard. Ivory was the name I gave the mother because of her almost glowing and glittering white coat, tail, and mane, and she ended up coming when I called. Her rambunctious son, however, who I called Star, absolutely refused to learn his name. Sometimes when I played with him, he'd knock me down or trip me because he thought it was funny, and when I looked to his mother, she seemed to give me a look as if she were saying, "See what you have to look forward to?" Nevertheless, I found it charming. I would always treat the both of them with fresh apples and eventually sugar cubes. Ivory even let me ride her, but I always kept them my little secret, telling only Aragorn of our adventures in the misty forests. Eventually, I introduced my beloved little son to the both of them, and they all seemed to love each other right away. Ivory and I would have little play dates for the two of them, watching them interact and play in the flowers. Star was a lot more careful than Aragorn than he was with me, that was for sure. Part of me was a little jealous at that, but I was happy about it too. And as I watched Ivory interact with Star, teaching him, caring for him, loving him, my heart began to bloom like a flower. I'd compare it to my style of mothering, and it truly moved me. There was no real difference between our little families. Our love was the same love, and it was unbreakable. My sweet Ivory taught me that I was magical just like she was. Motherhood was my magic. I created a little human inside of me, and now I was raising him all on my own. In my heart, I truly believe that it was because of Aragorn that Ivory trusted me. Mothers can sense such things, I think. She didn't need her old partner, wherever the hell he was, and similarly, I did not need my ex-husband, and our sons definitely didn't need fathers that abandoned them. And in learning that, I finally found the strength I needed to let go of my anger, my resentment. And so Ivory and I became the best of friends, watching our baby boys grow up alongside one another. They seemed to mirror one another in their growth and their learning and their wide-eyed experience of the world. Aragorn even ended up riding Star like I rode Ivory, and we'd race one another throughout the Enchanted Forest. When Aragorn started school, I encouraged him to dress how he wanted, and surprisingly, he turned that right back around on me. And because of his cheering me on, I decided to get back in touch with little Johanna, something I'm not certain I would have done had I not met Ivory. My son and I dyed our hair pink before his first day of kindergarten, which was his idea. When shopping for clothes, we both tended to gravitate toward bright colors. He seemed to love rainbows just as much as I did. I shared my favorite things from my childhood with my son and our unicorn friends. From music to collectibles, film, and art, they all seemed to love them. But the important thing was that I was surrounding myself with things that brought me joy again. With Britney Spears posters and Lisa Frank stickers all around, my aunt's little house never looked so good. My life had become an endless state of pure serenity and a fantastical adventure. I had become one of the most beautiful rainbow characters from the 90s that I adored so much. My inner child was healing, and I was raising my son so that he would know not to change himself for someone else. He was going to be a better man than his father was. Eventually, however, a curious 5-year-old Aragorn asked me about his daddy. His classmates thought it odd that he did not have one, and I immediately felt as if I were going to vomit. Some families don't have a father, I explained, trying my best to teach my son the right thing. Some of them don't have a mother, others have 2 mothers, or even 2 fathers. All families look different. He looked up at me through his wide blue eyes. "But do I have a father?" he asked, holding Star close to him for comfort as we set out in the flowery yard. Looking over to Ivory, gazing into her cosmic eyes for an answer, I let out a sigh. She whinnied at me, telling me to be honest with him. Turning back to my beloved son, I nodded solemnly. "You do have a father, Aragorn. And though it had nothing to do with you, he left because he wasn't happy," I explained, feeling my heart breaking for my beautiful little boy. "If you would like, I can try to get in touch with him. Furrowing his little brows, he seemed to lose himself in deep thought. In a few moments, however, he turned back to me. "I think I would rather wait for him to try and reach out to us. Is that okay, Mama?" I nodded. "Of course. And if you ever change your mind, remember he's only one phone call away, okay?" In truth, I had forgiven his father long before this. Not for my ex. I'd never do anything for that dumbass after what he did. But I forgave him for myself and for my son, so that we could both move on in peace and acceptance. I actually hoped my ex-husband was happy, wherever he was. And letting go of that hatred, that bitter despair, was the hardest, smartest thing I have ever done. It unlocked the shackles that had been chained around my heart, and the strength I found to do so was in no small way thanks to my magical unicorn friends. After that, I dove back into my writing. Instead of a romantasy, I ended up penning a novel about someone finding her own strength as a woman through motherhood. And after a while of shopping it around, I found an esteemed literary agent, and she got me a book deal right away. Apparently, there is a market for feminist fiction, and the reviews were 5 stars across the board. I was ecstatic. Over the moon, really. My name was in magazines, online, on billboards. People had me as a guest on their podcast, always asking me the same question. What inspired this enchanting tale? Motherhood, I'd proudly proclaim every single time, and it truly wasn't a lie. Though, of course, I kept my magical secret to myself. Only my son and I had been invited into Ivory's enchanted world, and until she decided otherwise, I was determined to keep it that way. She trusted me, and I would never sacrifice a friendship as special as this. And thankfully, Aragorn felt the same way, despite really wanting to brag to his little friends at school. After it was published, I even read my book to Ivory, Star, and Aragorn, as we all sat in the flowers of the backyard in the milky twilight. Of course, this was when my son was a bit older, due to some violence and dark content of the story, and because of his growing maturity, I believe he was able to understand and appreciate it more. Still set in a fantasy setting, my main character's desire was to protect her son from a corrupt king. His Majesty was drafting firstborn sons into knighthood to fight a war of genocide against an innocent people. This was simply to spread his influence and power and hoard more wealth while his people starved in the streets. This is what molded a humble farm woman into the heroine that all of the kingdoms truly needed. Her husband betrayed her and their people, becoming the king's dark paladin, serving as a minor antagonist, although he did end up sacrificing himself to save both her and their young son. She dual-wielded swords and wore her auburn hair in Nordic braids, wearing mostly leather armor, and of course she had a noble unicorn steed whom she valiantly rode into battle. Though the unicorn didn't speak, she was able to convey her thoughts and feelings to my main character through whinnies, neighs, and hoof clops, all while being humorously opinionated. That seemed to be everyone's favorite part. And in the end, she won the war and dethroned the wicked king. The kingdoms all united and founded a new country led by a council made up of leaders from each of the peoples, with her at the center. Her son did become a knight, by his own choice when he came of age, but he fought for a kingdom that he truly loved, not for a king that he feared. This love story was one between a mother and her child, a love story between a citizen and her country, a love story between a woman and her inner child, and they all lived happily ever after. Because everyone loves a happy ending, right?